Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be doing a strength and hypertrophy pull day. Our strength movement is going to be weighted pull-ups, but overall everything is going to be kept kind of heavy. So this is a great workout just to be able to not only put on size, but increase your strength all over in terms of the back, the biceps, and the shoulders. So what we're going to start off with is just some mobility drills here. So this is something that I always do before every workout in terms of upper body. And what I do here is just grab some really light dumbbells. I usually grab 5s or 3s, and I'm just going to put my elbows to where they're kind of parallel above the ground. And then I'm just going to drop my hands forward in order to be able to lower the weight and kind of just focus on my rotator cuff. So with these, you don't really want to get anything too heavy, and you want to make sure you keep the control the whole time. So don't really drop them. Make sure that you're slowly lowering them. I usually do about 15 to 20 of these, just to kind of get some blood pumping into the area. So I usually combine this with what's called dislocations, and I'll grab a pole and kind of just hold to where my elbows are locked out, and then I'm just going to take it and try to pull it as far back as I can while keeping those elbows locked. So I'm going to hold kind of wide here, and I want to make sure that I go as far back to where my elbows do not break. So as soon as those elbows come unlocked, you've gone too far. Maybe try holding a little bit wider or not going back so far, but over time you'll find that you'll be able to go all the way down into your lower back here. So after I do kind of my forward ones, I'll go to the side and kind of just loop it overhead. So just try to copy that movement, and then I'll reverse right afterwards. So I like these a lot. They kind of just help me with shoulder flexibility and upper body mobility as well before I start doing anything too heavy or too crazy. So the first movement we're going to start with is going to be the weighted pull-up. So I would say start kind of light or just start with body weight. And every time you do this exercise, we're going to just see if we can go a little bit heavier until we do less than the required reps. So we're going to try to stick with 4 to 6, but if it winds up getting too heavy to where you can't even do 4, then you might want to go back down. But this exercise for me, I try to keep really slow, really controlled, and really try to get a good stretch at the bottom. So sometimes I get kind of gassed towards the end more than I usually should, but I try not to really jerk at all. Another thing I like to think about is as I'm getting to the end of my set, if I know I'm going to fail that particular rep, I try to just hold at the top. And if I can just pull myself as high as I can and hold for just a second, that's better than just dropping and being done. And something else I want to point out here, guys, is I don't usually wrap my thumbs around in terms of pull movements. So by keeping my thumbs out, I can kind of think of my hands as hooks and really use my back muscles to kind of pull everything up, because my hands don't really have too much invested into them, if that makes sense. So usually the rule I give myself is I'll get 3 sets or so with just my grip. And then the last 2 sets, I usually will put on my Versa grips. And this is just because sometimes I notice that my fingers will lose their strength in the bar before my muscles will actually fatigue. Before any pull-up movement, you'll kind of see me grab the top of the bar here, and then after I kind of get settled, I'll roll my shoulders back just to kind of get them tucked and make sure that I don't really pull with my shoulders too. So something I try to think about is trying to keep a straight back, not an arched back. So something you might notice is as you're doing these, you have a tendency to almost pull your chest forward to be able to get up to the top. So what we're really trying to focus on is just trying to get a good stretch in those lats, and also make sure that we're not just following the path of least resistance, because our body likes to follow what is known as the path of least resistance, to where if there's an easier way to do something, we usually find ourselves falling into that movement. But with any sort of bodybuilding or just working out in general, we want to make sure that we're doing it the right way and not necessarily the easier way. So the next exercise we're going to do is going to be the T-bar row. This is probably my favorite back movement, and we're going to do 5 sets of 6 to 8 here. I don't normally use a belt or grips, but since I'm going heavier today, going for 6 or 8 reps, I'm going to just make sure I wrap up to take all the kind of non-essential parts out. So I want to make sure that my grip isn't compromised. I want to make sure that my lower back doesn't get sore before anything else does. So I want to make sure I kind of take all of that into consideration before actually doing this movement. So the T-bar row is great because it's great for your core, your back muscles, your lower back, a little bit of hamstring, just all over kind of bracing yourself, as well as your forearms. So with this particular movement, I like to keep my feet about shoulder width apart. I'll usually try to put the handle maybe 2 or 3 inches from the top of the bar. And I always put my thumbs out again. With any pulling movement, I try to just put my thumbs out, just to kind of limit any sort of arm takeover. So after I set my feet, I'll try to roll my shoulders back, and then I almost think about squatting down as if I'm hiking a football. So you want to just get shoulders back, chest out, and then just kind of drop your hips back and squat down to be able to grab that V-bar. And something else I like to think about with the T-bar row, or with any exercise, is to think about squeezing the muscle you're trying to work before you start your lift. So I really try to just squeeze my back before I even start going to make sure that only my back is really going to be pulling. So what rolling your shoulders back does is kind of just sets your scapula, sets your shoulders to make sure that you're really only pulling with the back, and that at the maximum contraction only your back is really working here. And I just try to think about kind of pulling with my elbows. I kind of just think of my hands as along for the ride, but I really try to just make sure that only my elbows are doing the pulling. So that way I can kind of think of my back as a lever. And usually with this I try to take between a minute and a half rest between sets. Alright guys, the next exercise that we're going to do is going to be the one arm dumbbell row. So this is a great one that I like to throw in because it's a unilateral movement. So after we've done our pull-ups, after we've done our T-bar rows, we want to throw in something that works the back sides individually and not together, because my left side is stronger. But if I always worked both arms together, my left side would usually take over since it's stronger. So we want to make sure we're working not only our left side or our right side, but both of them individually to make sure that one is not going to be weaker than the other in the long run. So with this one, I try to just put one hand on the back of the bench just for balance. I'll take my other foot forward into almost a lunge position, and then I'm just going to drop down. I always think about starting with the dumbbell kind of near my opposite ankle, and then I'm just going to pull it up with my elbow again. I'm going to pull it up to where my hand is even with my hip. So with this, I always try to synchronize my breath as well and make sure as I'm coming up, I'm getting a big exhale. But I really try to think about almost bringing that dumbbell forward as I go down and pulling it back as I go back versus just thinking about pulling up, because I really do feel like that helps you stretch out that lat and squeeze it much better. And I usually, between sets, let's say I started the first set with my left arm, I'll start the next set with my right arm. Does that make sense? But I really like this movement. It really makes you feel strong, and I really do feel like I can get good width with this exercise, especially if you do it right. So just try to keep your core braced, keep your legs set, and then just make sure that you're pulling with just that back. So the next thing we're going to do are shrugs, and we're going to do 5 sets of 8 here. So we've already done our weighted pull-ups, we've done our heavy T-bar rows, and we've done our heavy one-arm rows as well. So in order to keep working on those thicker portions of the back, we want to work on shrugs. That way we can also hit those traps a little bit too. So I usually use a machine like this, if I can find it. Some gyms have it, some gyms don't. I really like it just because of the way that the handles work, and also the way that you kind of pivot as you stand up. So if I don't have a machine like this though, then I usually will just use the bar and use wraps with an overhand grip, or I'll use the Smith machine. And I like the Smith machine because it works in a set line, but if you have a machine like this, definitely make use of it. I know some people use it for deadlifts. I really like it for shrugs. Now when I do these, I think about bending my knees and kind of leaning forward at my hip, and then think about kind of pull up as if you're a puppet and you have strings in your shoulders and somebody's pulling you towards the ceiling. It's easy sometimes to just push the shoulders up towards the ears, but with this one, by leaning forward and also trying to pull straight up from there, we can really work those traps a little bit better than you normally would by standing straight up and just pulling upright. So with these, I really like to do 8 because I feel like that's a happy medium. If we were to do 15, I feel like it would be a little bit too light of a weight. But if it was like a set of 5 for shrugs, I just feel like that wouldn't be enough to really challenge the traps. And as you can see, everybody's got a shrug face when it gets hard. Mine is kind of disgusting. So now that we've worked the majority of our back muscles, we're going to start working on the biceps, the forearms, and the shoulders, just as accessory movements. So since I've kind of gotten all of my strength related stuff out of the way, And I don't have to worry about my grip strength anymore. I don't have to worry about making sure that my arms don't get fatigued. I'm going to tack on a couple sets of biceps, a couple sets of forearms, and then a couple sets of shoulders, just to kind of finish off those muscles. Because as we pull, we also work on our biceps. As we pull, we also use our shoulders. So since we've done all of our pulling movements that involve our back that we want to take care of, we're able to work on some of these other secondary muscles to really kind of burn them out. So right now I'm going to do a reverse curl with the easy bar here. I'm going to do 3 sets of 8 to 10, and I'm going to superset that with a dumbbell preacher curl for 3 sets of 8 to 10. So I love the reverse grip curl with the easy bar because it feels very natural in my hand, and also I get a great forearm pump by using it. And I usually try to keep my thumbs either wrapped under or over top. I feel it differently both ways, but maybe just play around and see what you like better. I also like to bend forward a little bit at the hip, and the reason that you want to do that is so that way when you're at the top of the movement, your forearm bones don't really support the weight. We want to make sure that our forearm muscle is the thing that's holding everything up at the top. So if we were to stand up straight, then our forearm bone would kind of take over and support the weight, whereas we want our forearm only to be able to support that. Does that make sense? So as we go through here with the preacher curl, I'm going to try to make sure that I squeeze my bicep and keep that squeeze on the way down. So something I also read in the Arnold Encyclopedia is he likes to think about the peak of his bicep just kind of pumping up and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, like it's being filled up with air as he keeps going up. And I always like to kind of turn to open my chest. I'll usually maybe put one foot out to the side just a little bit. And then as I go through, I try to keep my wrist kind of limp, my arms straight up and down as you're looking down the pad. Sometimes you'll notice as you're starting to curl that your arm goes out to the side a little bit, but really try to correct that and make sure that it's a straight line as you look down your arm. And as you open up that chest, you can kind of pivot yourself to make sure that only that bicep will be doing all the work, because sometimes the shoulder can take over as well. Now that we've finished up with the biceps, we're going to work on the shoulders. So the last thing I'll usually do in this routine is cable lateral raises and face pulls. Both of these we're going to superset for 3 sets of 10. Cable lateral raises I love because it's a great isolation movement that you don't usually feel the same way as you would with a dumbbell. I really do feel like I can pull straight out, and that's because the cable is fighting me to go back in, versus with a dumbbell you're usually fighting gravity as you pull up. So it's a little bit of a different movement because this time I'm pulling out rather than up. So with this, I also like to think about my hand being across my chest. Some people like to hold on to the side and lean out. But for me, putting my hand across my chest and trying to just stand up straight, I feel like I can really kind of isolate that side delt and I can pull straight out without any assistance. Before any of these movements, I always like to roll my shoulder back and tuck it. And as I pull straight out to the side, I try to think about like the Phantom of the Opera or something where you're kind of sweeping out a cape, like a matador or something like that. Because sometimes it's easy to go a little bit forward as you go out to the side. So I really try to just go straight out as best I can. And watch your weight too, because it's easy to get the traps involved for this particular movement if it's too heavy. So keep it light enough that you only feel it in the side of that shoulder. So with face pulls I usually do them standing, but I'm not able to do that at this gym, so I'm just going to do them seated. I like to usually keep them at eye level if you do them standing. I like to keep the rope about eye level versus super high, so that way I can pull straight back, but I'll usually hold onto the ends of the ropes, and then think about pulling into a back double bicep here. So we want to turn our wrists to face each other, we want to pull our elbows out high and wide, and we want to make sure that our hands are pulled to either side of our ears here. So just think about just those shoulders being responsible for rotating everything. And I really like these because you can really feel it in that particular area. And it's more about the stretch and the squeeze versus anything else. So something I really like to do for all of these, I'm going to be using an app called Rep Count. I'm not sponsored by them, I just like the app. And I like this because you can really kind of write in your reps, your sets. It keeps track of what you did last time, so that way you kind of have that accountability. And also I write little notes to myself just saying how I did, how I felt, the reason why I might not have completed it like I thought I would. Usually between sets, I'll like to just get some dynamic stretches. I'll usually do some huggers, just kind of shake everything out and just try to get like a swimming motion, just to kind of open up that shoulder girdle, stretch everything out that was just previously contracted. And also between sets, I'll try to hit some poses like a lat spread, front double bicep, just to try to make sure that I'm squeezing everything like I should. If I'm feeling it too much in my shoulders, if I'm feeling it too much in my biceps versus my back, I'll really try to squeeze my back as best I can while I'm posing to make sure that I can try to squeeze that, know what it feels like, and then use that feeling on the next set of my workout. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you get something from it. Let me know what you think in the comments. I hope to do a lot more of these, and I hope that I kind of can figure out how to make it a little bit more effective every time. Maybe in a couple months or so, I'll be pretty good to getting into the swing of things and can make these a lot better. But anyway, good luck. Let me know what you think.